On the second day after my wedding, with my clothes soaked in sweat, I stood frozen on the back patio, surrounded by 6 tables worth of greasy dishes and barbecue scraps. My new husband's family, fully fed and content, was sitting in the air-conditioned living room watching television. The moment I stepped inside and gathered the courage to ask my sister-in-law to help me rinse a single basin of dishes, a deafening smack echoed through the room. A brutal slap landed directly on my cheek, making me see stars. It was not a stranger who hit me. The person who just swung his hand and knocked me down to the hardwood floor was my newlywed husband, before our honeymoon had even begun. He gritted his teeth and cursed at me, calling me a lazy woman who dared to boss around his precious little sister right after joining the family. What do you viewers think about this outrageous behavior from a husband? Please leave your comments and share your thoughts below. And do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the Life Stories Network to follow the full development of today's story. I am Harper, 28 years old. After spending my youth working relentlessly to build my career, I established a solid position as a regional director for a Fortune 500 corporation. But in the eyes of the older generation, no matter how brilliant a woman's career is, not being settled down with a family is still a cause for concern. Under the pressure of my family and their endless urging, I decided to tie the knot with Preston. Preston was a human resources director. On the outside, he always appeared to be a calm, knowledgeable, and incredibly thoughtful man. His family also carried the facade of a highly educated, traditional household. But little did I know that all that kindness was just an elaborately staged play, and that fake velvet curtain was torn down on the very second day. I stepped into my role as a daughter-in-law. That morning, the early summer air in Atlanta was already sweltering. I woke up at 5 in the morning, tiptoeing out of bed for fear of waking Preston. The clothes and belongings in our master bedroom still carried the faint scent of mothballs and light lilies. I walked down the stairs, my stomach churning because I had not had a proper meal in days due to the exhausting wedding preparations. As soon as I reached the kitchen, I saw my mother-in-law, Eleanor, already sitting at the dining table. She was wearing a maroon cashmere cardigan, her hair neatly styled, and her face carried a gentle smile, but her eyes were sharp as a razor, scanning me from head to toe. I greeted her. "Good morning, Eleanor. You are up early." Eleanor smiled faintly and pointed to the chair opposite her. "Sit down, Harper. I need to tell you something." Yesterday's wedding was too crowded. Many relatives flew in from out of state and did not get a chance to properly speak with the new bride. Preston is my eldest son, and as the new woman of this house, you must know how to treat our extended family. I am planning to host a massive backyard barbecue this afternoon for over 30 of our closest aunts, uncles, and cousins. It is to officially introduce you and bond the family together. What do you think? Hearing about a feast for over 30 people, I was slightly stunned. That is no small party. My body was still aching from the chaotic days of preparing for the wedding. But thinking of my duty as a new bride, I suppressed a sigh, smiled, and replied, "Yes, ma'am. Let me help you go to the supermarket and prep the vegetables. We might need to ask a couple of aunts to come over early to help us finish on time, right?" Instantly, the smile on Eleanor's lips vanished. She changed her tone, adopting a sickly, sweet, yet overbearing voice. "Oh, come on now. In this family, the tradition has always been that the women of the house handle the cooking with their own 2 hands. My arthritis has been acting up lately, and standing too long makes me dizzy. As for Chloe, your sister-in-law, she just got back from her gap year in Europe. Her hands are delicate, and she is not used to the smoke and heat of a kitchen. Today is your chance to show off your domestic skills so the relatives can see Preston has a good eye for a wife. I left a $100 bill on the fridge for groceries. You figure out how to stretch it for 30 people. Make sure there is pulled pork, brisket, grilled jumbo shrimp, and plenty of potato salad and coleslaw. Do not embarrass me. $100 for a massive barbecue for 30 people. My ears were ringing. In this economy of soaring inflation, taking $100 to the grocery store to buy a feast is impossible, but I did not want to argue on my second day in the house. I stayed silent, went upstairs, and took another $300 from my own wallet. Then I rushed out to the wholesale market. For the entire morning, I spun around in a cramped kitchen that was less than 150 square feet. I was trimming brisket, peeling mountains of potatoes, deveining shrimp, and mixing huge vats of coleslaw. The smell of raw seafood, the heavy scent of pork fat, and the thick smoke from the backyard smoker made me nauseous. The t-shirt I was wearing was soaked in sweat, clinging tightly to my back. Meanwhile, in the living room barely 10 steps away, the television blared a noisy entertainment show. Preston and Chloe were lounging comfortably on the plush leather sofa. Chloe was holding a bowl of expensive, imported green grapes, eating and scrolling through her phone, occasionally bursting into high-pitched laughter. Preston was sipping iced tea, his eyes glued to a replay of a football game on the 65-inch screen. Absolutely no one stepped into the kitchen to ask if I needed a hand. Around 10 o'clock, while I was sweating profusely slicing brisket, Chloe walked into the kitchen. Wearing a flimsy silk slip dress, she leaned against the doorframe, scrutinizing me. "You cook pretty slow, do you not? Our family is used to eating exactly at noon. You better hurry up. The relatives are arriving soon." "Oh, and I saw the shrimp you bought. They are tiny. We are used to eating premium jumbo seafood. Since you married into this family, you need to drop your cheap habits." I froze. The knife in my hand stopped on the wooden cutting board. I took a deep breath, enduring it, trying to keep my voice calm. "Chloe, the money your mother gave me was only $100 for a 30-person party. I had to use my own money just to buy this much food. If you think I am slow, come help me wash these salad greens so I can set the tables on time." Chloe rolled her eyes and gave me a piercing glare. "You are hilarious. Housework is the wife's job. You came here to carry the burden of the house, not to boss your husband's sister around. I just spent nearly $100 getting my nails done. You want me to ruin them in that dirty pile of lettuce?" After saying that, she slowly turned on her heel and walked straight back to the living room, leaving me standing alone amidst the chaotic piles of food. I silently watched her frail figure walk away, a bitter feeling of self-pity rising in my throat. I used to manage hundreds of employees and direct multi-million-dollar projects, yet here I was being treated like trash by a spoiled brat, ordered around like an unpaid servant. I looked out to the living room, hoping Preston would speak up to defend his wife. But no, Preston just called out in a monotonous voice. "Harper, just work faster. Why are you nagging her? She is still young, she does not know how to do chores. Still young." She was 26 years old, had studied abroad for years, yet behaved with such a lack of basic decency. But what disappointed me the most was Preston's attitude. The man who, just 48 hours ago, had knelt to exchange rings and promised to protect me for life, was now calmly indulging his sister's terrible behavior and ignoring his wife's struggles in the kitchen. At exactly noon, the relatives arrived in full force. Eleanor changed into a classy linen dress and stepped out to warmly greet everyone. Everyone praised Eleanor for being blessed with a daughter-in-law who was both successful and domesticated. Eleanor smiled brightly, her voice echoing through the house. "Oh please, I have been training this girl since day one. No matter if a woman is a corporate director out in society, when she comes home, she has to roll up her sleeves and cook for her husband and family. I will kick out any woman who thinks her money makes her superior." Every word Eleanor spoke felt like an invisible knife slicing my ears. I carried the heavy trays of food out to the patio, my face flushed from the heat, forcing a distorted smile. Not a single person invited me to sit down and eat. Preston was busy pouring beers and toasting with his uncles. Eleanor was busy bragging to the aunts about how brilliant her daughter was abroad. Chloe just sat there picking the best cuts of meat for her plate. I quietly retreated to a dark corner of the kitchen, hastily eating a bowl of cold potato salad and leftover meat just to settle my stomach. Sitting in that dark corner, listening to the lively clinking of glasses outside, I suddenly realized I had fallen into a perfect trap. They did not see me as a daughter-in-law, a member of the family. They saw me as a trophy, a cash cow, and an unpaid maid to satisfy their vain egos and deep-rooted patriarchal mindset. The meal dragged on for nearly 3 hours. When the relatives finally left, they left behind on the patio a mountain of greasy plates, leftover food scattered everywhere, and thick barbecue sauce clinging to every white ceramic dish. Eleanor yawned widely, stretched, and said she was going upstairs to rest her back. "Harper, clean everything up spotless before you rest. The dish soap is right there under the sink. Make sure you scrub everything twice to get rid of the grease smell." Saying that, she slowly walked up the stairs. Preston also turned to me and said indifferently, "Clean up fast and go take a nap. We are having more food tonight, so prep the remaining meat." Not a single word of encouragement, not a single offer to share the load. They automatically considered that war zone of a mess to be my undeniable duty. I looked at the mountain of dishes, my legs wanting to give out, but I bit my lip tightly, telling myself to stay calm. I rolled up my sleeves and started sorting through the mess. The summer afternoon sun was blistering. The intense heat hit my face. I diligently scraped the leftovers into a large trash bag and started scrubbing furiously. After finishing 3 tables worth of dishes, my back ached as if someone had snapped it. My hands, soaked in soapy water for so long, began to wrinkle and sting. I stood up, stretched my back, sweat pouring down and stinging my eyes. From the living room, I heard the sound of Chloe opening the fridge to grab a soda. A thought flashed in my mind. I could not just silently endure this exploitation forever. They were testing my limits. If I obediently submitted, I would be crushed by them for the rest of my life. Thinking that, I wiped my wet hands on my apron and took heavy steps toward the living room. I walked from the kitchen, which reeked of grease and smoke, into the living room. The freezing air from the expensive air conditioner hit my face, making me shiver slightly. The sweat on my back turned cold and sticky, creating an incredibly uncomfortable sensation. The contrast between the 2 spaces in the same house made me feel bitter. Just a few steps away, the place I had just stood was a battlefield filled with garbage and exhausting labor. Meanwhile, the place where Preston and Chloe were sitting was a world of selfish enjoyment. I looked around. On the polished leather sofa, Chloe was sprawling, her legs propped up on the glass coffee table. The massive TV was blasting a loud music channel. The table was littered with sunflower seeds and candy wrappers. And Preston, the husband to whom I had entrusted my life barely 48 hours ago, was leisurely sipping his iced tea, his eyes never leaving his phone screen. I paused at the doorway, taking a deep breath to regain my composure. I told myself that maybe Preston just was not paying attention, that maybe Chloe was just immature. After all, a family needs patience from the smallest things. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my tone as gentle and peaceful as possible. Chloe, since you are free, could you please come out to the patio and give me a hand? There is a huge mountain of dishes out there. I have been cooking and running around since this morning. My back hurts so much, I can barely stand straight anymore. I have already scrubbed them with soap. You just need to help me rinse them with clean water so we can finish early and go rest. My voice rang out amidst the noisy TV. Chloe did not change her posture. She slowly lowered her phone, using her sharply lined eyes to look me up and down. Her bright red lips curled into a contemptuous sneer, forming a mocking half-smile. You are hilarious. She dragged out her words in an incredibly grating tone. You have been in this house for 2 days and you are already trying to order your husband's sister around? Housework, cooking, and dishes are the wife's job. You are the daughter-in-law. If you do not do it, who will? I just paid $100 to get these acrylics done with rhinestones. You want me to stick my hands into that filthy, greasy water and ruin my nails? If you are slow, just take your time. Nobody is forcing you to be fast. But do not drag me into your lower-class chores. I stood completely stunned, unable to believe what I had just heard. A 26-year-old girl who had the privilege of studying abroad, who was properly educated, could utter such cultured, arrogant words. Anger began to ignite in my chest. I am a regional director. I manage dozens of employees. I make 6 figures a year. I have never had to bow down or listen to anyone degrade me with such a despicable tone. Chloe, watch your mouth. I sternly lowered my voice, no longer keeping the submissive demeanor from earlier. I am your sister-in-law, but first and foremost, I am a human being. I did not marry into this family to be an unpaid servant for you and your mother. I shopped, cooked, and cleaned for over 30 people by myself today. Asking you to help rinse a few plates is a completely normal thing in a family that shares responsibilities. Do not use your manicure as an excuse to dodge work and insult others like that. As soon as I finished speaking, Preston suddenly slammed his phone down on the glass table, making a deafening crack. He stood up abruptly, his face darkening, his eyes flashing with angry red veins. The atmosphere in the living room suddenly froze. I looked at Preston, expecting a fair word from my husband. But no, Preston marched aggressively toward me, pointing his finger right in my face. What did you just say? Preston roared, his voice hoarse and brutal, completely different from the polite, educated man he always portrayed when he was chasing me. You married into this house, you eat our food, you sleep in our bed, and you dare open your mouth to lecture my sister? Chloe is right. You are the wife, your job is to serve this house. You wash a few dishes and you complain and make a scene so the neighbors can laugh at my family? You lazy woman trying to dodge a little bit of work. Do you think you are the queen of this house? I widened my eyes in shock, stepping back, feeling as if a bucket of freezing water had just been thrown in my face. What did you say? I asked, my voice trembling slightly from the sheer shock. You call me a lazy woman? Who rolled up her sleeves and worked since 5 a.m. for today's barbecue? Who spent $300 of her own pocket money to buy enough premium food to save your family's face? What did you and your sister do? You sat with your feet up eating fruit. And now you turn around and call me lazy? Do you have any basic human decency left, Preston? My words were like a spark thrown straight into a powder keg. The truth being exposed severely damaged Preston's fragile ego. He ground his teeth so hard they made a terrifying clicking sound. Without saying another word, Preston stepped forward, raised his right arm high, and delivered a thunderous slap straight to my face. Smack! The sound exploded in the quiet room, sharp and ruthless. The force of the slap was so strong it whipped my head to the side. I lost my balance, stumbled backward a few steps, and collapsed onto the cold tile floor. My left ear was ringing. A long buzzing sound echoed in my eardrum. My vision went completely dark for a split second. Tiny stars exploded before my eyes. The blinding pain radiated from my cheek, burning and stinging across half my face. I pressed one hand against the floor, struggling to sit up. My messy hair covered half my face. My throat felt bitter, and the metallic smell of blood trickling from my split lip hit my nose. I sat on the floor, holding my swollen cheek, staring blankly at the man standing in front of me. My eyes were wide open, and not a single tear fell. It was not suppression, it was the absolute death of my soul. My heart, which had beaten so joyfully when I put on my pristine white wedding dress less than 2 days ago, was now shattering into tiny pieces, falling into the abyss of despair. Preston was still standing there, his chest heaving as he panted heavily. The hand that had just slapped me was still clenched into a tight fist. His eyes looking down at me held absolutely no pity or regret. They were filled only with the bitter, satisfied resentment of a patriarchal tyrant who had just used violence to crush the resistance of the weak. Right then, Chloe was not only unafraid, but actually laughed out loud. A shrill, malicious, and incredibly triumphant laugh. You deserve it. She clapped her hands, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Great hit, Preston. A woman who does not know her place, trying to climb over everyone else's heads, needs to be taught a lesson she will remember for life. That will cure you of your loud mouth in this house. From the stairs, Eleanor slowly walked down. She was still wearing her cashmere cardigan, her face as indifferent as if nothing major had just happened. She walked over, crossed her arms over her chest, and looked coldly at me sitting on the floor. Not a single question of concern, not a single word of pity for her daughter-in-law. She cleared her throat, uttering toxic words like poisoned knives plunging straight into my heart. That is enough, Preston. You do not need to get worked up and scratch your hands over an ungrateful woman, Eleanor said slowly, acting like an elder disciplining a subordinate. Harper, do you see the consequences of talking back? In this family, the tradition passed down from Preston's grandfather is that women must obey in silence. When the husband speaks, the wife is forbidden to argue. You just stepped through this door a few days ago, and you are already trying to argue with your mother-in-law, inciting your husband to hit his sister, trying to divide their sibling bond? Let me tell you, in this house, Chloe is precious, while you are just an outsider brought in to serve and bear children. That slap from Preston was his generous way of teaching you. If you have any education, you better kneel down, apologize to your husband and your sister, and then go outside and clean those dishes. Do not act like a spoiled princess here. Eleanor's words fell into the space, every single syllable echoing in my head. Kneel down and apologize. Generous teaching. Women must obey in silence. They called that ruthless slap a generous teaching. They called exploiting my labor a family tradition. A whole family of 3 carrying the facade of educated, respectable people, ultimately revealing their true forms as barbaric, selfish, and utterly cruel monsters. I remained motionless on the floor. The blood from my torn lip trickled down, tasting salty and bitter on my tongue. My jawbone throbbed every time I slightly moved. But strangely enough, the physical pain at this moment made my mind incredibly sharp. A cold, terrifying clarity. I understood everything now. I understood why Preston had always acted so obedient and pampering during our 6 months of dating. It was not love, it was a scheme. He knew I was a regional director. He knew I owned a luxury penthouse under my own name. He knew I had a massive savings account. He and this family had set up a perfect trap to lure me in. They wanted to turn me into a gold mine to drain, a servant to wait on them, and a toy to trample on to satisfy their cheap sense of authority. I slowly raised my hand and wiped the streak of blood from the corner of my mouth. In that moment, the weak, enduring woman who had always yearned for a simple, warm family life inside me died for good. She died right under the brutal slap of that traitorous man. Rising from the ashes of that destruction was a completely different Harper, a decisive, cold-blooded executive who never bowed down to injustice. I would not stay silent. I would not cry and beg. Nor would I scream and argue like an out-of-control madwoman in the streets. They wanted to play with me. They wanted to test my limits. Then I would show them that messing with Harper was the biggest and final mistake of their pathetic lives. I slowly pushed my hands against the floor, biting my teeth through the pain in my cheek, and slowly stood up straight. I held my head high, my eyes sharp as daggers piercing straight into the faces of Preston, Chloe, and Eleanor. The sudden shift in my gaze made all three of them flinch slightly. The smile on Chloe's lips died. Preston furrowed his brows. He seemed to feel an invisible aura of pure lethal intent radiating from the woman he had just knocked down. The atmosphere in the living room became suffocatingly tense. I stood tall. Even though my legs were still trembling slightly from the fall, my spine was straightened with an extraordinary pride. In the stifling space of the living room, where the cold air from the expensive AC mixed with Chloe's heavy perfume and the bitter scent of the iced tea on the table, I chose silence. My silence at this moment was not the humiliating submission of the weak. That silence was like a deeply calm lake right before a massive, raging storm strikes. It was the moment a seasoned predator retracts, observing its prey before delivering the ultimate fatal strike. Preston still stood there, arms crossed over his chest, his face tilted up in sheer arrogance. He looked at me with half an eye, certain that the slap had completely broken my dignity, teaching me an unforgettable lesson about their so-called family values and traditions. Eleanor leisurely sat down on the plush armchair, smoothing the wrinkles on her clothes, looking as relaxed as a queen mother who had just finished executing a guilty maid. Chloe, the 26-year-old sister who studied abroad, went back to popping juicy grapes into her mouth, chewing loudly and throwing mocking glances my way. They were waiting for me to burst into tears. They were waiting for me to cover my face and run crying upstairs or scream wildly like a lunatic, so they would have an excuse to continue degrading me as uneducated trash. But no, I disappointed them. This Harper, who built her career single-handedly, who managed dozens of staff and negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts, would never grant these despicable people a single tear. I reached up, smoothed back the messy hair on my forehead, and tucked it neatly behind my ear. My left cheek was swollen now, radiating intense heat like it was on fire. I could clearly feel the marks of 5 fingers branded on my skin. I casually reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. My movements were slow, calm, and so decisive that the space around us seemed to stretch taut. Seeing me pull out my phone, Preston let out a sneering laugh, his voice full of challenge and contempt. "What do you think you are doing? Calling your mommy and daddy to cry and tattle? You are 30 years old and you call your parents over every little thing? Do you have no shame? I dare you to call them. Call your folks over here so I can tell them exactly how their daughter was raised, daring to come into her husband's house and boss her sister-in-law around." Eleanor chimed in with bitter words. "That is right. Call your in-laws over so I can ask them how they raise their children." Not even 3 days in the house, daring to talk back to her mother-in-law and inciting her husband to hit his sister. A married daughter is like spilled water. If you make an eyesore of yourself in this house, your parents will bear the shame too. You better know your place, put that phone away, kneel down, and apologize to Preston and Chloe right now. Stop playing games. I remained silent, a chilling silence. I did not respond to their sarcastic provocations. I unlocked my phone, slowly swiped to the camera app, and turned on the front-facing camera. I raised the phone to eye level, aiming the lens at my own face. On the bright screen, the image of a woman with slightly disheveled hair, a bleeding lip, and a bright red handprint on her cheek appeared incredibly clear. Click, click, click. The shutter sound echoed 3 consecutive times in the dead silence of the living room. My bizarre action left Eleanor, Preston, and Chloe completely stunned. They stared at me, wide-eyed, unable to comprehend what the woman who just took a beating was up to. Chloe quickly spit out a grape seed into her hand, frowned, and yelled, "Are you crazy? You get your face smashed in, and instead of being embarrassed, you whip out your phone for a selfie? Are you planning to post this on social media to beg for pity? You sick woman." I slowly lowered my phone, saving the 3 photos into a double password-protected cloud folder. Then I looked straight into Preston's eyes. My voice rang out, neither loud nor soft, without a single tremor. It was flat and freezing like an iceberg. "Preston, this slap of yours, I have documented it. I took a picture to save the memory of my second day as a daughter-in-law in this house. To remind myself of the excruciating price of blindly trusting your sweet, hypocritical vows. Saying that, I did not give Preston a chance to react. I took 2 steps back, my finger secretly tapping the voice memo icon on my screen. The recording app started running, counting every second, capturing every ruthless sound in this house. I looked up at Eleanor. My face wore an incredibly serene expression. I spoke up, intentionally asking questions to bait them into speaking their coercive demands to create ironclad evidence. "Eleanor, what did you just tell me to do?" I asked, lowering my voice to fake submissiveness. "You said I had to kneel down and apologize to Preston and Chloe, right?" Hearing that, Eleanor thought I was terrified and yielding, so she proudly raised her voice to preach her morality. "The recording app captured every single word. That is exactly right. If you do wrong, you kneel and admit your fault. This is a respectable family. A daughter-in-law crossing this threshold must submit to her husband. Preston is the provider. If he says he hits, he hits. If he says he scolds, he scolds. You displeased him. Getting slapped is getting off easy. As for Chloe, she is your husband's flesh and blood sister. You have a duty to serve her, not open your mouth and order her to do chores. Do not think just because you have some director title at your company that you have any authority in this house. You are just the daughter-in-law meant to cook and sweep. Remember that?" I nodded slightly, the corner of my mouth twitching into an imperceptible smirk. Every arrogant word, every degradation of women's dignity, every endorsement of violence from Eleanor was permanently saved as a crystal-clear audio file. I turned to Preston, launching my second question. "And Preston, you slapped me to the ground until my lip split, just because I asked your sister to help rinse some dishes. You are an educated man. You work in human resources. Do you find your use of violence against your wife to be justified and something to be proud of?" Preston glared at me. The fragile ego of a patriarchal man was triggered. He had no idea he was sticking his head into the noose I had prepared. He roared, pointing his finger straight at my face. "So what if I hit you? You are my wife. I have the right to discipline you. Do not talk about just one slap. If you keep up this insolent attitude and disrespect my mother and sister, I will break your legs. Do you think having a few extra dollars means you can buy this house? Apologize. I make the rules here. If you cannot follow them, get out." Perfect. The recording was flawless. Every threat of violence, every admission of assault was nailed into the evidence file. I glanced at Chloe, his precious little sister. I did not even need to ask. Chloe automatically chimed in, adding weight to her family's impending doom. "Did you hear my brother clearly?" Chloe lifted her chin arrogantly. "You better drag yourself out to the patio and clean those greasy dishes. Scrub them carefully. You break it, you buy it. Then go buy some premium-grade beef so we can have a steak dinner tonight. Do your job as a servant properly and stop arguing." I silently looked at the 3 people who were intoxicatingly drowning in their illusion of power. They thought they were kings and queens who could trample on a woman's dignity at will. They thought the power of violence and ancient, outdated lectures could turn an independent, autonomous woman into a domestic slave. But they were dead wrong. They were incredibly short-sighted and stupid. They had no idea that my composure right now was the death sentence for this rotten marriage. I reached down and hit the stop button on the recording. The audio file, over 5 minutes long, was safely saved with one small tap. I uploaded all the images and that audio file to my highly secure cloud storage, while simultaneously sending a backup copy to my private email. I did all of this naturally. My face did not change color as I firmly held the ultimate weapon that could smash their fake, respectable facade at any moment. My mind felt incredibly light. I slowly looked up, putting the phone back into my pocket. My eyes swept over their faces, from the old, overbearing Eleanor to the violent, patriarchal Preston, and finally Chloe, the spoiled brat with a ruined personality. The confidence and arrogance on their faces suddenly faltered. They began to feel that something was terribly wrong. My gaze was not that of a panicked bird locked in a cage, but the gaze of an eagle looking at filthy sewer rats. The coldness radiating from me seemed to drain the oxygen from the room. "Eleanor, Preston, and Chloe." I spoke slowly and distinctly, my voice striking their eardrums word by word. "Everything this family wanted to teach me today, I have recorded without missing a single word. Those 6 tables of dishes outside, whoever ate from them can clean them. Harper was born, raised, and highly educated by her parents to go out into the world, contribute to society, and create millions of dollars in value. Not to be dragged here to act as a punching bag for your anger, nor to kneel and apologize to heartless monsters. Preston's face paled. He stepped forward, raising his hand to slap me a second time, but I did not step back. I glared straight at him, my eyes sharp as scalpels, making him freeze midair. "You just try touching me one more time," I said coldly. One slap was the absolute limit. If you dare raise your hand again, I promise you, the price you will pay will not just be money, but the total and utter destruction of this entire family's reputation. Having said that, I decisively turned on my heel, ignoring the stunned, jaw-dropped expressions of all three of them. They seemed paralyzed by my verbal counterattack and commanding presence. I took firm steps straight toward the back door. The greasy, foul-smelling dishes were still scattered across the wet patio. I did not even glance at them. I walked over, reached down, and untied the light blue apron around my waist. The apron was soaked in sweat and stained with grease. Holding it in my hand, I threw it down with absolute disgust right into the center of the messiest table of dishes. The sound of the apron hitting the plates was crisp. It was the sound of severance, the final period to my meaningless endurance and sacrifice for this rotting family. I washed my hands clean under the cold water tap, smoothed my hair, and casually walked straight back into the house, heading for the stairs leading to the second floor. Toward the cold master bedroom, leaving behind the mumbling and weak curses of Eleanor and her children as they snapped out of my psychological dominance. But right now, those sounds no longer reached my ears. They were just puppets dancing in despair. As for me, I was preparing to push the fateful button to end this ridiculous charade. I turned my back and walked away, leaving behind the filthy, greasy patio and the furious mumbling of my in-laws. Every step I took on the polished hardwood stairs echoed steadily, cold and dry, just like my heart at that moment. The exhausting fatigue from a morning slaving in the kitchen seemed to vanish completely, replaced by a source of sharp, ice-cold energy coursing through my veins. I walked into the master bedroom on the second floor. The spacious room was decorated with red ribbons and elaborate happy wedding signs pasted on the walls. The air still carried the faint scent of mothballs and lilies, a scent that had made me feel warm and happy less than 48 hours ago. But now, looking at those blinding red decorations, I only felt they were obnoxious and incredibly absurd. It was like a gilded cage cleverly disguised to trap a naive bird. But unfortunately for them, they locked up an eagle by mistake. The first thing I did upon entering the room was grab the heavy brass door handle and turn it hard twice. A loud click echoed as the solid steel deadbolt locked into the doorframe. I even carefully slid the security chain at the top, ensuring no one could use a spare key or brute force to break in. The thick oak door closed, completely isolating the suffocating, fake, and violent world outside from my private space. I stood leaning against the door, closed my eyes tightly, took a deep breath, and slowly exhaled. Absolute silence wrapped around me. But this silence did not scare me. On the contrary, it acted like armor, isolating me so I could begin mapping out my next moves. Just as I predicted, barely 3 minutes later, heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs from below. Preston had chased after me. He lunged at the door, using his large hands to pound heavily against the oak wood, creating vibrations that echoed down the hallway. "Harper, open this door right now," Preston roared, his voice hoarse and threatening. "Do you think hiding in there fixes anything? If you have the guts, open this door and let us talk properly. You turn this house upside down and you think you can just lock the door and go to sleep? Open the door before I lose my patience and smash it to pieces." I remained leaning against the door, arms crossed, my expression completely unchanged. I maintained absolute silence, not bothering to reply with even half a word. Outside, Preston continued to scream, curse, and pound on the door like a rabid animal locked out of its cage. The more he raged, the more pathetic and cowardly he seemed. A man claiming to be the provider, yet only knowing how to use his fists and screams to intimidate his wife. Seeing that Preston could not force me to speak, Eleanor also waddled up the stairs. Her heavy footsteps stopped outside the door, followed by her shrill, toxic, and highly manipulative voice. "Preston, move aside and let me talk to her." Eleanor snapped at her son, then lowered her voice, intentionally projecting it into the room with a tone that was half threatening, half patronizing. "Harper, I know Preston has a temper. He made a mistake accidentally slapping you, but you are a woman, you need to know how to compromise. When the husband is angry, the wife speaks less. You are making a huge scene, hiding in your room like this. Outsiders will laugh in the face of this respectable family. I am standing here representing this household. I am telling Preston to apologize to you. Open the door, wash your face, and go down to clean the dishes on the patio. Everything can be resolved. Just treat this as a lesson for husband and wife to understand each other better. Open the door, dear. Do not make me stand out here until my legs hurt. Hearing Eleanor's honey-coated, hypocritical moralizing made a wave of extreme nausea rise in my stomach. They hit someone until their lip bled, trampled someone's dignity to the absolute bottom, yet wanted to erase everything with an accidental excuse and a few bland, coaxing words. They still firmly believed that if they just lowered themselves a bit, dispensing a little fake gentleness, I would obediently bow my head and become their unpaid labor machine again. I smirked slightly. My silence was still perfectly maintained. I turned my back to the door and took decisive steps toward the beautifully carved mahogany wardrobe. Time was running out. I could not waste another second listening to their meaningless words. I threw open the wardrobe doors and pulled my large designer suitcase down from the top shelf. I unzipped it and began packing my personal belongings. I did not pack the expensive silk dresses or the luxury cosmetics. I selected exactly 3 professional business suits, 1 set of pajamas, a few essential toiletries, and tossed them neatly into the suitcase. My hands worked swiftly, my mind organizing everything in the most logical and cold-blooded sequence. After packing my clothes, I walked over to the corner of the room where a small digital safe was hidden inside a drawer. This was the safe I brought from my own place before the wedding. Preston had absolutely no idea what the passcode was. I quickly punched in the familiar sequence of numbers. The safe door popped open. Inside, there was not much cash, but it held the most important items that dictated my life and career. I carefully pulled out a stack of documents wrapped in a waterproof bag. It contained my ID, passport, degrees, business licenses for the branch under my name, and most importantly, the deed to my luxury 1,300-square-foot penthouse located in Midtown Atlanta. Staring at the deed bearing the name Harper, my gaze turned incredibly sharp. I suddenly recalled the weeks leading up to the wedding. Preston had repeatedly used sweet, manipulative words to suggest I add his name to this deed, claiming that husband and wife are one entity and assets should be merged to show absolute trust. Even Eleanor dropped subtle hints that a daughter's assets upon marriage should be managed by the husband for the family to prosper. But this Harper was not a 3-year-old child. I had survived in the corporate world for years, seeing through countless fake masks. I firmly refused, citing that it was a premarital asset and needed to remain separate to facilitate business loans for my company. Looking back now, my decision was pure divine intuition. They had planned to drain my labor, mentally control me, and their next step would undoubtedly have been a scheme to seize the massive wealth I had shed blood, sweat, and tears to build. I neatly tucked the stack of important documents into the zippered compartment of the suitcase. Next, I took out all the jewelry, gold, and diamonds gifted to me by my parents and business partners on my wedding day. I absolutely did not take a single item belonging to Preston's family. From the cheap gold wedding band to the inexpensive necklace Eleanor had put on me at the altar. I slid the wedding ring off my ring finger, looked at it with utter disgust, and tossed it straight onto the glass vanity table. The sound of metal clinking against glass echoed dryly, marking the end of a deceitful romance and a dead-on-arrival marriage. Having packed all my personal assets, I zipped the suitcase shut. The suitcase now held not just belongings but my pride, my secure exit strategy, and my entire financial lifeline. I sat down on the edge of the bed, reached up to smooth my hair, feeling the swelling on my cheeks still throbbing. It was time to unleash my second counterattack. A counterattack that did not use fists or spit, but the sheer power of intellect and financial dominance. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and found the name Julian. My brilliant VP of Finance and trusted assistant, who had stood by my side for years. The dial tone rang steadily. Julian picked up immediately with a highly professional tone. Yes, boss. What is the emergency directive for a Sunday afternoon? My voice was ice cold, devoid of any emotional fluctuation or weakness. Julian, you are at your computer right now, correct? Boot it up and do exactly what I say immediately. A command issued meant no delays. I am ready. Give the word, boss, Julian replied, his tone becoming serious and tense. Task number 1. I enunciated every word, sharp as a razor. Instantly freeze the entire funding process for the distribution network expansion project with Global Trade Corp. Immediately pull back the $1.5 million seed capital we wired into their escrow account last week. Cite the reason as the partner failing to meet our risk management standards and showing signs of corporate ethics violations. Prepare an internal press release to send to their board of directors, stating clearly that our corporation is unilaterally terminating all contract negotiations indefinitely. On the other end of the line, Julian hesitated for a beat, clearly shocked. Boss, that $1.5 million project was brokered and guaranteed by your husband, Preston. He just hosted a celebration party last week because he locked in the deal with us, and he was about to be promoted to executive VP. If we pull the funding so abruptly, their company will face an immediate liquidity crisis. Preston will definitely be held liable for damages and face imminent termination. Are you absolutely sure about this decision? I smirked, a smile colder than winter ice. Very sure. You do not need to ask questions, just execute exactly as I said. They thought they could easily take Harper's money to build a career ladder for an incompetent, useless man? I will make him understand where real power lies, and who holds the kill switch in this economic chess game. When Global Trade Corp loses that $1.5 million, their supply chain will collapse within 24 hours. Their board of directors will drag the guarantor him out to face the firing squad. That is the price he pays for the slap today. Understood, boss. I will execute the capital withdrawal in 15 minutes. Any other directives? Julian's voice grew firm. He was smart. Just hearing my tone was enough for him to understand that a catastrophic event had occurred, and his job was to protect my interests at all costs. Task number 2, I continued commanding. Tomorrow afternoon, contact the HR directors of all the strategic partners in our corporate ecosystem. Put Preston's name on the industry blacklist. Quietly inform them that any company daring to hire this man will automatically be removed from our corporation's priority vendor list. I want to sever every career path he has in this industry. A man devoid of basic human decency, who does not respect women, has no right to step foot into the corporate elite. Understood, boss, Julian replied succinctly. Operation Phoenix Fire, the financial blockade against Preston, officially begins now. Do you need me to send a security detail over to ensure your safety? I shook my head, even though Julian could not see me. No need. They are just cowards who only bully the weak. They don't have the guts to do anything to me. Just handle the financial blockade properly. I will take care of the rest myself. Remember, every action must be swift, decisive, and strictly legal. Do not leave a single loophole for them to fight back. I hung up the phone and tossed it onto the soft bed. Outside the oak door, the pounding had dwindled. Preston seemed to have tired out his hands and gone hoarse. Eleanor had also stopped spewing her long-winded morals. I could only hear the mother and son muttering and cursing at each other because they could not force me to open the door. They thought I was hiding in my room to cry, to torture myself, or to debate whether I should swallow my pride and apologize. They were so stupid they could not even imagine that in just the last 20 minutes of brief silence, the daughter-in-law they treated like garbage had quietly activated a machine to crush the entire future, career, and reputation of their family. Preston was so proud, bragging to his relatives that he was a genius, a solid provider. But the truth was, his competence was below average. That HR director chair he sat in, and the opportunity to become vice president through that $1.5 million project. All of it was due to my quiet intervention, my backing, and my intricate network in the business world. I had been generous. I had wanted to elevate my man to build a shared future. But when he swung his hand and delivered that ruthless slap to my face, he personally shattered his own golden ticket. The arrogance of a patriarchal man blinded his logic, making him forget the core truth. Without Harper backing him, he was just a nameless grain of sand, an unemployed loser who would soon be purged from this ruthless society. I stood up and walked into the bathroom, rinsing my face with cold water. The freezing water running over the red swelling on my cheek made me feel more awake than ever. I took my makeup compact and applied a very thin layer of foundation over the slap mark. The makeup was not meant to hide my weakness, but to ensure my face maintained the most flawless, cold, and authoritative look when I faced them for the last time in this house. I pulled my long hair up into a tight, high bun, exposing my elegant forehead and proud neck. I stripped off my wrinkled loungewear and changed into a jet-black, tailored business suit, throwing a sleek trench coat over my shoulders. Right now, I did not look a single bit like an oppressed, humiliated new bride. I was the image of a powerful, cold-blooded CEO stepping onto the battlefield to clean up the collateral damage. I slipped my feet into sharp black stilettos, creating crisp clicks against the hardwood floor. I rolled my suitcase right up to the door, my left hand holding my designer handbag filled with my life's documents, my right hand resting on the freezing steel deadbolt. Every escape route was secured. Every brutal financial sanction had been triggered. I was completely ready to walk out of this hell on earth disguised as a respectable home. Outside, their family was still sitting in the living room, waiting for me to crawl down and confess my sins. They were definitely imagining the scene where I would timidly step down, my head bowed, eyes filled with tears, mumbling an apology. They would then proceed to hurl insults, teaching me another lesson to satisfy their egos. But they had no idea that the moment this door opened, their real nightmare would begin. I slightly curled the corner of my lips, a lethal half-smile appearing on my face. I forcefully twisted the security chain and turned the lock. The deadbolt snapped open with a sharp click, sounding like a judge's gavel slamming onto a desk, sentencing to death those who dared trample on my dignity. The heavy oak door slowly swung open. The light from the hallway poured in, illuminating the proud, unyielding silhouette of a woman newly resurrected from absolute pain. The wheels of my massive suitcase rolled across the hardwood floor, emitting a dry, rhythmic clattering. Pulling the suitcase with one hand, holding my handbag in the other, I slammed my stiletto heels down the stairs. The sound of my heels echoed proudly and decisively, like war drums tearing through the deadly, suffocating silence of the house. Down in the living room, the three people with the last name Preston were still sprawling on their expensive sofa. They were busy eating seeds, sipping tea, probably smugly waiting for the moment the new bride would meekly walk down, head bowed and tearing up, to beg for forgiveness. But the moment my silhouette appeared halfway down the staircase, all the noise in the living room instantly died out. They turned to stone. 3 pairs of eyes widened to the max, staring blankly at the woman descending the stairs. I was no longer wearing wrinkled loungewear, soaked in sweat and smelling of fishy grease from the morning. Dressed in a sharply tailored black suit, my posture was tall and arrogant. My hair was pulled back, highlighting my face and eyes as cold as ancient ice. The red slap mark on my cheek was flawlessly concealed by makeup, showing absolutely no trace of weakness or vulnerability. I did not look like an abused woman trying to run away. I looked like a queen cleaning out her palace, preparing to execute traitorous subjects. The first to react was Chloe. The sister-in-law, usually so insolent and arrogant, suddenly froze. The half-chewed sunflower seed fell right out of her mouth onto her shirt. Chloe stammered, pointing at my suitcase. "Where are you taking that suitcase? Who are you trying to scare? You got scolded by Preston and instead of knowing your place, you are pulling a stunt of running away from home to throw a tantrum? Stop acting. Nobody in this house is falling for your childish, dramatic tricks." I stepped down the final stair, stopping right in the middle of the living room, about 3 steps away from where they sat. I silently let go of my suitcase handle. My sharp eyes swept over Chloe's young but utterly deceitful face. My silence radiated an invisible, crushing pressure so heavy it made Chloe shudder. She quickly retracted her finger and shrunk deep into the corner of the sofa. Seeing his sister overpowered, Preston slammed his teacup down on the coffee table and shot up. His face was flushed red, thick veins bulging on his forehead. He aggressively marched over, blocking the path to the front door. He spread his arms wide, striking the pose of a patriarch desperately trying to defend his shattered realm of power. "You stop right there," Preston roared, his tone dripping with fake authority. "Where do you think you are going with that suitcase? Who gave you permission to step out of this house? I just taught you a little lesson and you dare pull the stunt of running away? You think because you have money and power out in society, you can do whatever you want here? Let me tell you, you stepped through this door. You pledged to my family. Alive, you are a member of this house. Dead, you are a ghost of this house. If you dare step out that door, this whole city will curse you as a promiscuous woman who abandoned her husband after 2 days. Try walking out if you dare. I will make sure you never have the face to look at anyone again." Preston's cheap, outdated, patriarchal threats did not make me flinch. On the contrary, they pushed the sheer contempt in my heart to its absolute peak. I burst out laughing. A dry, clear laugh, but dripping with bitter sarcasm. My laughter echoed through the room, smashing right into the deceitful ego of this traitorous man. "Preston," I spoke slowly, dropping every word distinctly, sharp as a razor. "Do not use that rotten, archaic morality to threaten Harper. Alive a member, dead a ghost of this house? You overrate your family way too much. A family where the mother-in-law is a manipulative exploiter, the sister-in-law is an uneducated, lazy brat, And the husband is a violent, useless, cowardly loser who hides behind his mother's skirt and uses his fists to intimidate women. Even if this hell on earth was paved with diamonds, Harper would not take another half step inside it. Sitting on the sofa, Eleanor's face turned deathly pale upon hearing my direct insults. She was so furious, her hands trembled violently. She slammed her hand down on the armrest, staggered to her feet, pointed right at my face, and hissed through her teeth. "You little brat, you dare curse your husband's entire family like that? Have you lost your mind?" I closed my eyes and turned a blind eye, intending to give you an out, telling you to apologize and stay. And you dare humiliate this respectable family? Preston, slam that door shut. If you do not break this brat's legs today, I am not a human being. Beat her until she learns what family discipline is. Beat that arrogance right out of her. Seeing his mother add fuel to the fire, Preston became even more aggressive. He rolled up his dress shirt sleeves, lunging toward me. His eyes were bloodshot like a bloodthirsty animal. But he had barely taken 2 steps when I coldly raised a hand. My eyes, sharp as lightning, pierced straight into his bloodshot eyes. "You take one more step and see what happens." My voice was freezing, without a single tremor of fear. "You think I am some weak woman you can beat or lock up whenever you please? Inside this handbag are the ownership papers to a luxury penthouse worth millions under my name. Inside that suitcase is my entire financial lifeline. And inside this phone is a 5-minute and 32-second audio recording capturing every death threat, every threat to break my legs from you and your mother. Along with a close-up photo of my cheek branded with your handprint. If you dare touch a single hair on my head right now, the police will be here immediately with charges for false imprisonment and aggravated assault. Do you want to gamble your rotting future against me?" Hearing the words police and audio evidence, Preston's feet froze midair. His aggressive face instantly stiffened. His eyes widened, overflowing with sheer panic. He was not stupid. He worked in HR. He knew exactly the value of legal evidence and the consequences of getting tangled with the law. His violent, overbearing demeanor instantly deflated like a punctured balloon. He slowly lowered his hands, taking half a step back, his eyes darting frantically to seek help from his mother. Eleanor was equally stunned. Her jaw dropped, her lips trembling so hard she could not form a word. This family was used to using patriarchal authority and vulgar shouting to overwhelm weak women. They had never crossed paths with a highly educated woman, well-versed in the law, with an ironclad, defensive mind like mine. The fact that I secretly recorded audio and took photos of my injuries the very second I was assaulted was something they never could have imagined in their wildest dreams. Seeing them dead silent, fear beginning to spread in the eyes of the people who had just been aggressively threatening me, I smirked and unleashed my final punishment. To completely crush their cheap pride, I looked straight into Preston's pale face, speaking with heavy sarcasm, my words hitting like a sledgehammer against his male ego. "Preston, you always beat your chest, proudly calling yourself the provider, the powerful man of this house. But do you know how pathetic and cheap that authority really is? Do you think I did not know why you married me? You targeted my assets. You targeted my director title to build a ladder for your miserable career. You tried to sweet-talk me into adding your name to my penthouse deed, but you failed. That is why you and your mother staged this violent power play today, trying to terrify me into submission, hoping I would obediently hand over all my wealth to you. You are just a pack of robbers dressed in suits and cashmere." I took a step forward, forcing Preston to back up against the door. My cold breath and overwhelming presence kept him from daring to lift his head and look me in the eyes. "That slap today, I am returning the favor with your entire career," I said softly, but every word weighed a ton. "The $1.5 million project with Global Trade Corp, the project you were counting on to become vice president. I just ordered my assistant to freeze all funding, pull the capital immediately, and cut ties indefinitely. Not only that, your name, Preston, will be put on the blacklist of our entire corporate HR network. Tomorrow, when you take your briefcase to work, what is waiting for you is not a fancy vice president chair. It is a termination letter for causing millions of dollars in damages to your company. It is a massive debt you will never be able to repay, and it is absolute rejection by the entire corporate ecosystem. That is the ultimate price you pay for daring to raise your hand and strike a woman who gave her all for you." Preston's world entirely collapsed. His legs turned to jelly. Unable to stand, he had to grab the door handle to keep from collapsing. His face was chalk white, beads of cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. He stammered, his voice trembling in sheer panic and begging, Harper, Harper, you are lying, right? You cannot be that cruel. That project is my entire life's work. If you pull the funding now, the company will sue me for damages. I will go to jail. Harper, I beg you, I know I was wrong. I was foolish earlier. I lost my temper. Hit me, curse at me, but please do not destroy my life like this. We are husband and wife. Please, for the sake of our relationship. I looked at the tall man cowering and trembling, begging in front of me. I felt not a single ounce of pity in my heart. Just 5 minutes ago, he was roaring, threatening to break my legs when he thought he held the power. He chose to trample me ruthlessly. Only when he lost everything did he start talking about the bond of marriage. That cowardice only disgusted me. Get out of my way, I shouted, my authoritative voice booming. Do not dirty my clothes. From this moment on, I and this rotting family have absolutely zero connection. We will meet in court, where the law will strip away your violent, fraudulent masks. Saying that, I forcefully shoved Preston aside. Weak and stunned, he stumbled and crashed against the wall. I reached out and decisively threw open the front door. The cool late afternoon breeze rushed in, blowing my hair back, washing away the moldy, fake scent of this hell on earth. Out in the driveway, the white luxury SUV I had Julian carefully book for me was already idling, waiting. The chauffeur, dressed in a sharp uniform, quickly stepped out and took the heavy suitcase from my hand. Eleanor finally snapped out of her daze. Seeing her son's career and legacy crushed by my single command, she panicked, abandoning all her respectable dignity. She lunged at the door, grabbing my arm, wailing miserably. Harper, I beg you. My child, how can you have the heart to drive your husband's family to death like this? Chloe is still young and foolish. Preston was careless. You are the adult, you are educated. Be generous and spare our family. I promise. From now on, I will treat you like a queen. I will do whatever you want. Do not leave. Do not pull the funding from Preston's company. I beg you. I coldly yanked my arm out of Eleanor's fake, desperate grip. I brushed off my suit sleeve as if I had just been touched by filthy garbage. I glared at her with ultimate disgust. Save your crocodile tears, Eleanor. When your son slapped your daughter-in-law until she bled, why didn't you cry for me? When you forced me to wash 6 tables of greasy dishes, why didn't you think about being generous? Karma is a cycle. It does not spare anyone. The price your family is paying today is the exact crop you and your son planted. Sit back and enjoy the harvest. I finished speaking, turned my back, and took proud strides straight toward the waiting SUV. I slid into the back seat and slammed the door shut. The tinted windows slowly rolled up, completely blocking out the image of the 3 people standing frozen, devastated, covering their faces and crying miserably by the front porch. They called my name, they begged, they screamed. But it was all too late. The SUV rolled forward, gliding swiftly through the noisy streets of the Atlanta evening. I leaned back into the plush leather seats, closed my eyes, and a single warm tear rolled down my cheek. It was not a tear of humiliation or pain. It was a tear of liberation, of a woman who had personally smashed her prison cage to reclaim her freedom, pride, and self-worth. My career was still there. My assets were safe. And most importantly, my spirit had never been broken. I won this war resoundingly and intellectually. The comfortable SUV glided through the bustling Capitol roads at dusk. Through the tinted glass, I watched the rushed flow of traffic, feeling an incredibly strange sense of relief seep into every cell of my body. The blind affection and foolish endurance of yesterday had been permanently left behind the heavy oak door of that cold, heartless house. Now my mind was filled only with cold calculations and the sharpest legal steps to seek justice for myself. My first destination was not my company, nor my luxury penthouse. It was the largest trauma center in the city. Stepping out of the car, I adjusted the lapel of my black suit, held my head high, and strode into the brightly lit lobby. The distinct smell of hospital antiseptics hit my nose, but it did not scare me. Instead, it made my mind even clearer. I registered for top-tier VIP service in the trauma department. When the silver-haired chief of trauma entered the examination room, he paused for a beat upon seeing me. Perhaps he did not expect a woman dressed in high fashion, exuding the authority of a CEO, to bear a swollen red handprint clearly marked across her face. I sat down on the chair, silently taking off my medical mask, completely revealing the injury caused by Preston's brutal slap. Doctor, I am a victim of domestic violence. I spoke in an even tone, without a shred of self-pity. I need you to perform a detailed forensic evaluation of the trauma and issue me a legally certified medical report. The doctor sighed, his eyes reflecting sympathy, but his hands moved with absolute professionalism. He documented everything meticulously in the medical record. He confirmed severe soft tissue trauma caused by blunt force, attached close-up photographs, and stamped it with the official red seal of the hospital. Holding the certified medical report in my hand, I smirked. This was the first talisman, the sharp legal weapon required to lock in the charges against that violent man. They thought a slap was just patriarchal discipline behind closed doors, but to an educated woman like me, it was ironclad evidence to drag them in front of a judge. Leaving the hospital as night fell, I directed the driver straight to the offices of Harrison and Associates, the most prestigious and expensive corporate law firm in the city. Harrison, my close friend and the chief legal counsel for my corporation, was already waiting at the door. Seeing me walk in with a battered face, his expression darkened, his thick eyebrows knitting together. "Harper, what happened? Who had the guts to touch you?" he asked in a deep voice, suppressing his rage. I calmly sat down on the real leather armchair in his lobby, accepting a glass of warm water from his secretary. I took a small sip, then opened my designer bag, pulling out the prepared items one by one and placing them on the glass table. The hospital medical report with the red seal, the phone containing the 5-minute and 32-second audio file, the close-up photos of my swollen face taken right after the assault, and finally, the deed to the Midtown penthouse under my name, along with all documents proving my premarital assets. "Harrison, I just ended my marriage on exactly the second day after the wedding," I said, my tone as light as if I were discussing a failed investment project. "I need you to represent me and file for an immediate, unilateral divorce. At the same time, prepare a lawsuit against Preston for aggravated assault and severe emotional distress. I want you to submit all this ironclad evidence directly to the Superior Court and the District Attorney's Office. No mediation, no settlements. I want him to pay the maximum price under the law." Harrison silently picked up my phone and pressed play on the audio file in the quiet office. Eleanor's arrogant voice, Preston's violent threats, and Chloe's repulsive laughter echoed clearly across the room. When the recording ended, Harrison set the phone down, a glint of admiration mixed with lethal intent flashing in his eyes. "You executed this brilliantly, Harper." Harrison nodded in praise. "Keeping a cool head to gather evidence at the very moment you were being abused to the extreme. Not every woman can do that. With this undeniable evidence, plus the medical report, I guarantee you, Preston will not only walk away with absolutely nothing in this divorce, but he will also face jail time, or at the very least, a permanent criminal record that will destroy his reputation forever." I leaned back in the chair, lacing my fingers together, exuding the aura of a true powerhouse. "That is only the legal strike, Harrison." I smirked, a dangerous half-smile. The real fatal blow is on the financial front. This afternoon, I ordered Julian to pull $1.5 million in capital out of Global Trade Corp, entirely severing the project Preston was guaranteeing. Simultaneously, I issued a decree to blacklist his entire career path across the HR industry. "Harrison, I want it so that tomorrow, when my divorce papers are served to his house, it is the exact moment his entire world collapses." That night, I returned to my luxurious penthouse. The massive space, smelling faintly of familiar lavender essential oil, embraced me. No cursing, no smell of grease, no fake, money-hungry faces. I soaked in a hot bath, letting the bubbles wash away all the filth of the 2 days spent in that hellish house. The next morning, I woke up at 6. I chose a powerful crimson-red suit, applied a sharp coat of classic red lipstick, and confidently walked into the corporate headquarters. The moment I sat down in my plush executive chair, Julian knocked and entered, carrying a thick file and a knowing smirk. "Boss, Operation Phoenix Fire was executed flawlessly," Julian reported proudly. "This morning, as soon as the banks opened, the capital withdrawal order went through. Global Trade Corp's liquidity system instantly paralyzed. Subcontractors who did not get their advances immediately rushed their headquarters protesting for payment. Their board of directors is in a state of sheer panic. They blew up my phone begging us to reconsider, but I shut down all communication channels exactly as you ordered." I nodded in satisfaction, flipping through a few pages of the report. "Excellent. And what about Preston? Update me on that violent loser." Julian cleared his throat, trying not to laugh. "Boss, according to sources from their HR department, Preston showed up to work looking sharp this morning. fully expecting to receive his VP promotion. But the second he stepped into the lobby, security blocked him. The CEO of Global Trade Corp came storming down from the 15th floor, pointed right at his face, and screamed at him in front of hundreds of employees. He yelled that because of Preston's sheer stupidity, the company lost its biggest strategic partner and suffered millions in damages. Preston was fired on the spot, with absolutely zero severance. Furthermore, Global Trade Corp is preparing to sue him in commercial court, forcing him to pay damages for the breached contract caused by his personal negligence. Hearing this, a thrill of vindication ran down my spine. That is the inevitable consequence for those who dare use their dirty hands to strike the woman who elevated their lives. They thought they could step on my neck to drain my money, but they did not know I was the one holding the power of life and death. And boss, it does not stop there. Julian continued the dramatic update. The blacklist notification was blasted across the city's HR networks. This morning, the banks financing his car loan caught wind of the situation. They immediately called to demand early repayment because they flagged him as an insolvent client at risk of severe legal trouble. I bet right now, their respectable household is in absolute chaos. They are definitely crying their eyes out, realizing their fantasy world was completely obliterated overnight. Everything played out exactly like a perfect script, where I was both the writer and the director. I slowly stood up, walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my 30th floor office, and looked down at the tiny, ant-like traffic below. I thought of the image of Eleanor screaming wildly, of Chloe panicking because she had no more money to fund her lavish partying, and of Preston broken, drowning in debt, his reputation destroyed with nowhere to hide. His one slap yesterday, I returned today with a lightning strike that shattered his entire empire. Counterattacking with intellect and the law is always the coldest and most brutal weapon. It draws no blood, requires no screaming, but it severs every lifeline of the enemy. I smiled slightly, a radiant, free smile. This afternoon, Harrison would officially file the divorce and criminal complaints with the court. The upcoming days of court hearings would be a prolonged hell for the Preston family. And I, Harper, would stand at the very top, arms crossed, watching them pay the price for every single one of their filthy mistakes. 2 months passed since that fateful day. The preliminary hearing for my divorce and civil lawsuit officially took place at the Atlanta Superior Court. Today, the autumn sun shone brilliantly. A gentle autumn breeze rustled the leaves in the courtyard. I stepped out of my luxury car, wearing a pristine white suit, symbolizing purity and a completely radiant new beginning. Walking beside me was Harrison, exuding professional authority, and Julian, carrying a leather briefcase packed with decisive evidence. I held my head high, taking confident strides. My heels clicked against the pavement, producing solid sounds that drew the eyes of everyone in the waiting lobby. In a corner of the courtyard, the 3 members of Preston's family had just stepped out of a cheap rideshare car. A stark contrast to my power and luxury. Their appearance was so pathetic, no one could recognize the family that used to boast about their traditional, respectable heritage. Preston had lost a shocking amount of weight. His face was gaunt, his beard unkempt, his eyes sunken and bloodshot from endless sleepless nights. The dress shirt he wore was wrinkled and faded, his tie sloppy just like his life, which was in a rapid freefall. Ever since being fired and blacklisted from the HR industry, Preston could not find a single job. The massive debt from his former company suing him had turned him from an arrogant man into a miserable debtor, spending his days hiding from bank collection calls. Eleanor looked even worse. Gone was the mother-in-law in maroon cashmere, draped in heavy gold necklaces, preaching morality and family values. Today, she wore dark, worn-out clothes. Her hair had turned more than half gray from stress. She walked with a severe limp, having to lean heavily on Chloe's arm. Chloe, the sister-in-law who used to flap her lips criticizing my cooking and laziness, now had a pale face without a drop of makeup. Her eyes darted around fearfully. Their arrogant, overbearing attitudes had been crushed into dust by harsh reality. Seeing me approach, Eleanor's eyes suddenly lit up with a frail yet desperate hope. She quickly let go of Chloe, stumbling toward me, her legs shaking so badly she almost tripped. "Harper! Oh, Harper!" she wailed, her voice hoarse and incredibly pathetic. "I beg you, please have mercy and spare our family. These past 2 months have been worse than death. Preston is unemployed. People come to our gates screaming for debt collection every day. I had to mortgage the house his grandfather left us just to pay the interest. And Chloe had to drop out of her classes and wash dishes at a diner just to buy groceries. We know we were wrong. I was wrong. Tell your lawyer to drop the lawsuit. I beg you." She spoke and prepared to drop to her knees right in the middle of the crowded courtyard to weaponize my pity. But Julian quickly stepped forward, putting his arm out to block her, maintaining a safe distance for me. I stood looking at Eleanor with a flat, cold gaze, like a winter lake. I did not smirk, nor did I act angry. To me now, they were just strangers. They were not even worth my concern, Eleanor. I spoke evenly, enunciating clearly. This is a courthouse, a place of law and dignity, not your backyard patio to put on a dramatic play of the suffering mother-in-law. Why are you telling me about your family's misery? When your son slapped me until my lip bled? When you pointed in my face and forced me to kneel and apologize? Did you think about the word mercy? When your daughter laughed and ordered me to wash greasy dishes, did you think about the day she would have to wash dishes for minimum wage? Everything your family is enduring, people call it karma. You reap what you sow. You do not need to cry and blame anyone. Blame the greed and cruelty of your own family. Hearing my steel words, Eleanor sobbed uncontrollably, burying her head into Chloe's shoulder. Mother and daughter held each other crying in the middle of the courtyard. Preston stood from afar, witnessing his mother and sister humiliated. His hands clenched into fists, but he did not dare take a single step forward. His patriarchal authority had been entirely demolished. He hung his head, turned his back, and walked away, dragging a long, miserable shadow across the concrete. The trial officially began. The atmosphere in the courtroom was incredibly tense and solemn. The presiding judge was a stern, middle-aged man, flipping through the stack of documents page by page. After completing the initial legal procedures, Harrison formally stood up to present the indictment and demands on behalf of the plaintiff me. With a deep, resonant, and ironclad voice, Harrison presented the evidence one by one. The medical report with the hospital's red seal, the clear photos of the 5-finger handprint on my swollen face. And the climax of the trial was when the 5-minute and 32-second audio recording was played over the courtroom speakers. Eleanor's overbearing demands, Preston's threats to break my legs, and Chloe's despicable laughter echoed clearly through the room. The space seemed to freeze. Everyone present in the courtroom, from the jury to the audience, directed glares of absolute outrage and disgust toward the defense table. The faces of the 3 Prestons were drained of all blood. They buried their heads in their hands, resting on the table, so humiliated and ashamed they just wanted the floor to open up and swallow them. The lying excuses of their defense attorney became completely powerless against this irrefutable, ironclad evidence. Finally, the judge slammed his wooden gavel down, the sound echoing decisively as he delivered the final ruling. The court immediately granted my request for a unilateral divorce, ending the ridiculous marriage that lasted a mere 2 days. Not only did Preston not receive a single penny from my luxury penthouse, but the judge also sentenced him to the maximum penalty for domestic violence, ordering him to pay damages for emotional distress and my medical bills. Even though that compensation money was a drop in the ocean to me, it held massive symbolic weight. It was a public verdict, slapping him right in his fake, respectable face. Furthermore, his domestic violence conviction would permanently remain on his criminal record, forever stripping away any chance of a man who beats women to ever rise again in society. The trial ended. I stepped out of the courtroom, taking a deep breath of free, fresh air. The frustration and suppression of the past months were completely released. I felt as light as an eagle that had just shaken off a rusty iron cage, spreading its wings to soar into the vast sky. Just as I stepped down the front stairs of the courthouse, Preston suddenly lunged toward me. Julian moved to block him, but I raised my hand to signal him to stop. I stayed silent, wanting to face this loser one last time to see just how pathetic he had truly become. Preston stopped in front of me. His legs suddenly gave out, and he collapsed with a thud. The man who once proudly called himself the provider, who boldly claimed he would discipline his wife with his fists, was now kneeling at the tip of my stilettos, clasping his hands together, begging in absolute humiliation. "Harper, I apologize 1,000 times," Preston wailed, tears and snot smearing his hollow face. "I lost everything, Harper. I have nothing left. Massive debt. The bank is about to foreclose on my house. My reputation is destroyed. I know I am a terrible man. I was stupid. I was greedy. I beg you. You are a CEO. You have money and power. Just say one word to make Global Trade Corp drop their lawsuit against me, or else I will go to prison. If you just spare me, I will gladly work as a horse or a dog to serve you for the rest of my life. Please have mercy on a desperate man like me." I stood on the step above him, looking down at the man groveling at my feet. My eyes did not hold a single ripple of emotion. A wave of bitterness crossed my mind. So the essence of patriarchy and arrogance was built on such a foundation of cowardice and pathetic weakness. When faced with real power, they are ready to throw away all pride, kneeling to lick the boots of the person they once trampled on. "Preston." I spoke softly, the cold sound echoing in the empty space. "You do not need to kneel here and dirty my eyes. Everyone must take responsibility for their actions in this life. The moment you raised your hand to slap me, you personally signed the death warrant for your own life. I am not driving you to death. It is your own greed, your patriarchal ego, and your family's stupidity that dragged you into the abyss. Go beg the law. Go beg the people you dragged down with you, but do not beg me." Harper can forgive those who make honest mistakes, but I will absolutely never dispense pity to cruel and ungrateful monsters. Saying that, I decisively turned and walked away, not bothering to look back even once. Behind me, Preston's agonizing wails of regret and the miserable cries of Eleanor and Chloe echoed pitifully, blending into the noise of the city streets. I stepped into the luxury car waiting for me with an open door. The car door closed, leaving behind a dark past, leaving behind toxic people writhing to pay the price of karma. The car rolled forward, merging into the crowded traffic of the shifting city. I looked at my reflection in the tinted window, seeing a Harper who was bolder, stronger, and more proud than ever before. My career was waiting for me ahead. Multi-million-dollar projects needed my decisions. I smiled. The smile of a victor, of a woman who had used her intellect, courage, and pride to smash outdated, toxic traditions, asserting her true value in this world. Dear viewers and friends, the story of Harper's intellectual counterattack ends here today. Through this story, we realize that self-respect and intelligence are the strongest shields a woman has to protect herself against the storms of life. Do you feel satisfied with the ending for Preston's family? Please leave a comment sharing your thoughts below. Do not forget to like, subscribe to the Life Stories Network, and share this video to support the channel in bringing you more meaningful stories. Wishing our audience abundant health, peace, and happiness.